Because when you retire, which you and I are the only ones that can speak to that in this room, there's a huge loss there. And for anybody that's listening that's on the verge of retiring, just keep that in mind, that there's a huge, you got to grieve a little bit. Most people are so ready to get out, but they don't realize when they're out, they're like, oh, well, this isn't great. It was grieving, actually, I think probably is a better way to describe it. The grieving of the community and the family that I had. I was very, very close, and I'm still close with the guys. I still text, but it's different. There's no way to describe it. The whole point was I wanted people to know that counseling isn't necessarily kumbaya, laying on the couch, what we think. And if you find the right person, it's amazing. And it's no emotion. It's not emotion. And I think that's where people get confused, is when they're feeling emotion about a critical incident, they feel like it's a weakness and it's emotion. It's not. It's how our brain works. It's a function of our brain. Things get stuck in the wrong lobe, and they have ways to move them. And the other thing that I wanted out of this, there was a couple of things. I wanted the officers to come for free. I wanted them to feel served, because we're the servers. And to be served is really it feels great. God, it's amazing what that does for your psyche. And the staff that was in charge of food, you couldn't lift a plate. You finished your plate, she had that thing picked up with a smile. She was truly a servant. That's what I wanted officers to feel.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree. And we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Welcome, ATO listeners. I'm so fortunate to share the mics today with the whole clan. Joe. Oh, by the way, how about that sleeveless tuxedo t-shirt that we saw all over social media? Yes. Chris Webb, remember him? Sergeant Wilverton, of course. Our sound guy, Danny Canetti, is even here. And a special guest, Mesquite Assistant Chief Doug Yates. When you sit alone with your thoughts, do you ever come up with these grand ideas to make the world a better place? Can you pinpoint a vision you wish you would have acted upon? Now ask yourself, is this vision or grand idea selfless? Is it priceless? Is it fuel? When I look at these guys across the table, I see beloved teammates. I see my blue brothers. I see comrades with whom I have suffered. I am certainly among exceptional leaders. Joe and Chris forged their vision, their idea to life. They wagered their rugged warrior exterior for undisclosed vulnerabilities. They selflessly launched an awareness of suffering in others. Their pain fueled a force bridging our stout-heartedness with an unguarded awareness. Their visions complement each other. Was there fear? Yes. Did they question themselves? Of course. Did their inner voice ask, will this be viewed as weak or stupid? Absolutely. But what if their ideas, your ideas, make us stronger? Indeed, they already have. Our community is more aware and resilient. Therefore, we are better servants. Joe created this podcast. It was his brilliant vision. and Chris devised the most benevolent notion, the Righteous Oaks Retreat. And today we're going to bring these two visions together. Chris will share with you his intention. He will share some of the insecurities and apprehension that go hand in hand with ambition. Chief Yates and I were blessed to attend the inaugural 3-day event hosted just outside of San Diego, California, in June of this year. And I will share some of my insecurities and apprehension of attending this retreat. But I don't want to steal Chris's thunder. I want him to share every detail of his vision. Please welcome once again Lieutenant Chris Webb and his altruistic mission to make the world, our world, a better space. Welcome back.
Thank you, Misty. That was an amazing wordsmithing, as usual.
Word what?
Wordsmithing? I don't know if that's a word, but I'm not good at it, so that was amazing. Thank you.
For our listeners, you're now Lieutenant Chris Webb.
That's what they say. That's what the badge said they gave me.
Okay, so catch us up. What's it like to supervise?
It's a little different. The guys in Austin, my bosses, picked me. I was honored. I didn't foresee that happening. And I was very happy with what I was doing. So this has just been a little bit of a bonus. I got great guys I work with. It's a little different, the day-to-day. I didn't know how much admin work there was. So I'm an outside guy. So it's been kind of a little bit of a shift, but it's been really easy. I work with really, really good guys, and we get to go all over the state. And so it's been great. Dallas, I never thought about being a supervisor in Dallas, but Dallas absolutely prepared me and equipped me for it. And so my time here, if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. So I'm very appreciative of my time in Dallas and the people I worked around, and it set the stage for this portion of my life.
Did you gulp the Kool-Aid, or did you
Company
make
man.
it a point to refuse it?
Well, they didn't offer it yet, so I'm wondering if that comes down the road. I work for really good people, really good officers, and all of my supervisors have sat in my seat at some point. So it's been great. It's kind of just throw you to the lions. There's not like there wasn't a class. I didn't take a test. That's probably why I never promoted in Dallas, because I wasn't a great test taker. So, but I've just figured it out. And again, it's been really easy because the guys I work with are amazing. So,
Chief Yates, thank you for coming. Can you speak on that?
Thanks for having me here. On supervision?
Mm-hmm. Being part of the administration.
It's an interesting change from when you grew up as an officer there, and then you transition into supervision. But I would say, if I had to sum it in a few words, is responsibility, feeling responsible for the department and the employees and the people that work with you. Make sure they have to get done, to have the tools they need to get the job done. And then, servant leadership is a word that's thrown around a lot, but I think it's very important to have it to get the mission completed, which sometimes means you have to make decisions that aren't all that popular, but then a lot of times you get to make ones that are popular, and so it's all part of a plan. I was trained, but what I found that it's not all in the books. They don't train you for every aspect of the job.
Chief, for the listener, we have listeners across the country and even out of the country. You're assistant chief for Mesquite PD, Mesquite, Texas.
Yes.
Can you describe that department? How many sworn and civilian employees you command?
Sure. We've got around 330 employees, something like that. And I think 250 sworn, 254 sworn is our current complement. We're hiring, so shameless plug there.
Everybody's hired in this profession these days.
That's right.
And where are you located?
We're just east of Dallas, so we share a Dallas border. I guess we'd be southeast kind of Dallas on that side.
Thank you.
Grove Plus.
Still Dallas County.
Still Dallas County. We have a small piece of Coffin County.
Chris flattered me this morning by wearing his pearl snaps. And obviously I'm going to have to ask about what your workout routine is.
Just go every day. That's the secret. Go every day. I do that. It's my mental prep for the day. If I don't have it, I'm a mess.
And you didn't have it this morning?
I didn't, so I'm a little jumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the caffeine's didn't have anything to fuel, so it's got to get burned off somewhere. So it'll be in words in here, and I'll sweat it out in here too.
Yeah, Chris is a sweater.
It's a sweat box in here. Thank you, Danny, for keeping the door open.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna drag in one of those water coolers in here too. The
Big swamp cooler.
Yeah, swamp cooler.
I'm so impressed with these ideas, these visions that you guys have had. They're an inspiration, really, because all of us have some kind of vision or idea, and they're like, man, I wished I would have done that. And you guys actually acted on it and took a risk. And we know about Joe's idea, and we get the pleasure of hearing it, but we don't know about your vision. And I want you to dive into it. I want you to start from the very beginning.
I'll try to keep it concise. I'd retired from Dallas in 2017, and then I went to the real world. I thought I was done with law enforcement. Law enforcement had a different plan for me, but I felt very disconnected. You know, you go from this group of people, especially being on the team I was on, with them every day, seeing the same things every day. They're your little therapy group, and you get really, really close to them. You're so much a part of each other's lives because you spend so much time together, and then to go from that to zero was a really hard adjustment. And you know, I'd made a plan early on to not make SWAT my life because there's so many negative repercussions to that. But what I didn't prepare for was how much just being a policeman was who I was. And so, man, it was hard. I really battled with it. I was working for a friend. A guy wanted me to manage a company for him he was going to buy, and so it was supposed to be, you know, a quick deal, which ended up being a year. But during that year, a couple of events had happened. There was a suicide by a retiree who I'd worked around and was very friendly with. That kind of bothered me. He'd been out maybe a couple of years, and I realized that we don't do a very good job of preparing officers for leaving. And then I had a conversation, ironically, with a journalist who was writing a book on 7/7, and we talked a long time. I was out working 2 days in a row. I think we talked for like 5 hours straight both days, and she had written a really, really good article on the events that night. And some of the guys called me and said, hey, she's writing a book. We're all talking to her. So I was like, okay, I'll tell her to call me. And so we talked, but we talked a lot about other things too. It was interesting. She said, Chris, I have so much information that the story is so much more because of who y'all are. And so, talking to her, she told me about somebody I worked with who I knew very well, and told me that he broke down and cried talking about July 7th. And I was like, that dude's strong as an ox. How did that guy pick you to unload this on? And that's really ultimately where it started. I was like, I got to do something. Something needs to get done. And so Rainey and I have, Rainey's family had some property we inherited down in Bastrop, and we thought, let's build a resort and we can do whatever. And so I went to a Bob Goff conference, and the conference was it was Dream Big, and it was about having an idea and actually landing it. And I went to a conference. I read a book from Dr. Glenn on my way to that conference, and that's where I was like, I know what I want to do. I want to introduce people to this, because that book spoke in words I understood. And now I'd never been through counseling at that point, but I was like, man, I want other people to hear this. And so when I went to Bob Goff, I met a guy named Jed Strange, and he turned his family farm south of Atlanta into a retreat center called Strange Farms, which is funny to me. And he's the first guy I met, and I told him what I was thinking. He's like, man, don't build anything. Don't do anything to the property. Build the program. You can find places to do the program. And that really was because if I'd gone down that route, it'd never gotten done. We don't have the money for that kind of thing. So that's where it started. And that might have actually been 2018. And so I started trying to put it together in 2019, and we met with Dr. Glenn, and she agreed to come on board and do the program part. And then I'd set a date for like April of 2020, but then COVID hit. And so we shelved it. And then I got hired on with the AG's office, and it sat on the shelf for a long time. And then when we came in to tape this podcast with Shelby Houston, when we left, Rainey's like, it's time. And so really Rainey did the heavy lifting and got everything back up to speed. And without Rainey, it would never happen. I'm not a planner. And I laugh. Generally, Rainey comes up with the plan like, hey, we should get rid of that tree, and I'm the doer.
Sure. But
in this one time, I had an idea that I couldn't, it would not have landed without Rainey. So all those things you said are great, but it's not even 50-50. I mean, Rainey was the driving force behind getting it done. So that's how we got to where we are.
Tell our listeners what Rainey does for a living and where she is coming from.
So Rainey was a prosecutor for years. She did, I think, 15 years with Tarrant County in crimes against children. And so for me, she's the perfect partner because she knows what we do. And there's no mystery behind it because she saw the other side of it. She's now a magistrate judge in Tarrant County. And that's why she couldn't be here today, because she's working. So
did you communicate this vision to her?
From day one, talked through it. But I wasn't, because I was trying to plan it too. Because at the time, again, I wasn't working for the police department. I had more time. And so I was trying to do it all by myself. And that's also probably why it didn't totally come together back in 2019, 2020.
Do you think this idea would have evolved if you wouldn't have left Dallas?
No, it absolutely wouldn't have. I'd probably maybe be in the equipment room by now. Or I'd still be just grinding away, looking at the end, trying to get to the end. But back in 2016, Chief Brown needed something on paper to show the city that they were doing something about summer crime. And so they put us on evening shift. And so, kids were still in school. So I wasn't seeing my family, and that broke me. That's the thing that's like, it broke me. It was a perfect storm. I was broken because I wasn't seeing my family. It was miserable. I was a horrible human being to be around because I just wanted, and there wasn't really a plan. You know, SWAT stuff is SWAT stuff. I get it. I'll come in for anything if you got a plan, but it was really just go be on that beat. So I'm sitting up there in my squad car up in Northeast Dallas, and my family's at home. I'm like, I want to be with my family. So I would have, that's why I left. I wouldn't have left, and this would have never happened.
I'm going to read you a quote, and I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay. Is it real smart?
No.
Okay. Perfect.
You know I'm from Oklahoma. Practicing patience. Was it the key to developing your intention?
Man, that's deep. I don't know that patience was there at the beginning, which is why it didn't grow when it did. I think I was trying to muscle through it.
Isn't that your habits, though?
To just muscle through it.
Yeah.
That's every officer's habit. Just deal with it.
Redline it.
Yeah. Just go 100%, and no matter what the collateral damage is.
But when you retired and you had that time off before you became police again, was there patience within that time period?
Man, there was a lot. There was a forced patience at some point. It didn't start that way. It was chaos at first because it was just this loss of this. It was grieving, actually. I think probably is a better way to describe
Absolutely.
it. The grieving of the community and the family that I had. I mean, I was very, very close, and I'm still close with them, with the guys. You know, I still text, but it's different. There's no way to describe it. You actually described it to me when you left SWAT and you went to the academy, and you're like, Chris, you'll just never understand. It's completely different. You're just gone. And I didn't feel like you were gone, but I know not seeing people every day and being a part of it, man, things would happen in Dallas and I'd be like, man, I need to be there.
Sure.
And there's a guilt. I think a lot of people didn't know it, but there was a survivor's guilt after July. There was a lot of things piled on. And so you had to fight through all that. And then I think that the patience came, it was a forced patience where I was working. I was by myself all day, every day. And so I did a lot of thinking about what was important to me. And I think that's what ultimately, I wish every officer could take a year off, because I was gone 3, but when I started my new job, man, my perspective was different. I was just all in, and I didn't know I knew I needed to do something different, and it needed to serve, and it needed to matter. And what I was doing didn't matter to me. And there was 2 options I was totally open to. It was become a teacher in Arlington at the Career Center, or work for the Attorney General's office. And I was applying for both. I was substitute teaching to see if it was really a reality. And that's where the patience came. But I had to work through that grief process first of just being apart from it.
Would you say that involved suffering?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a suffering to it, because you've lost something. It's part of who you are. It's part of, it's a huge loss. And so from that, the suffering comes from.
I think suffering's a gift. And obviously you used it as fuel. And when you mentioned the operator that broke down and cried, I know who you're talking about. And I mean, an incredible warrior.
Unbelievable.
I have so much respect for him.
Yeah,
and
me too.
And I have him on a pedestal. But that just makes him more human.
Yep.
And Joe, I think that's where you're coming from too, suffering and creating this podcast. Will you talk on that?
Yeah. So the vulnerability in policing, and being vulnerable and policing, they're really not synonymous. But the vision to do this, we were trying to normalize it and make it go hand in hand, because it is, because it doesn't matter if you're police, fire, military, you're human first, right? And I don't care what kind of training you've had. I don't care how long you've been on an agency, or what big city, small town, it doesn't matter. You're a human first, and you're going to suffer like all other humans. And we just happen to be exposed to more trauma than most other humans and professions. And to start this, to normalize a conversation for people to be vulnerable and to understand they need help, or to reach out and help others, which is honestly is as rewarding, helping a peer, which I found is more rewarding than most any other police work I've done in Dallas. That's what my mission was. And it's kind of evolved from that.
Chris, tell us exactly what this retreat is.
Righteous Oaks Retreat is a 3-day excursion. We take you away. The concept is I wanted to introduce people to what counseling can look like for law enforcement officers. Again, staying away from being a kumbaya deal. It's not that. It can be something completely different. Our goals of the retreat, it's just that, give officers a retreat away from the day-to-day grind, kind of restore them and renew them. When they come back, they're rested. They've heard a little information about resilience training and how to be resilient in our line of work, and they get to be served and loved on in a way that cops will be all right with it. Right? We don't like kumbaya stuff, but there's just be served and know that people care about them.
That's exactly what it was.
It's exactly what we wanted it to be.
Yeah, it felt like family. It felt like it came from love. And it was a reset, a break. I look at it like maintenance. We all will go to a chiropractor to get our back ready for the PT test, or our hip, or we'll go get a massage to heal something that's giving us pain. Why do we refrain from healing our mind? Mm-hmm. The most important piece that drives us.
In this line of work, we've got a foot in normal life, and then we've got a foot in this real world. And you come to work for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever it is, and you see the worst of the worst in people. That people do horrible things to each other, and then you got to come home and you got to be mom and dad and brother and husband and wife, and you've got to just be able to flip that switch off. And it's so taxing. It's taxing on the officer. It's taxing on the spouse. It's taxing on the kids, whether you know it or not. And we find ways to deal with this stress that aren't healthy. And there are healthy ways to deal with it. And I didn't know about it. I didn't really know about counseling. It wasn't, ATO had started the program, but I didn't need that. I got my boys, I got my group. But, there's been things like Chief Ramirez's talk about what happened to him at North Central. I knew Chief Ramirez pretty well, really well. We ran around together. And when he transferred up to North Central and he had the loss of a baby on a call, I remember when it happened, but I wasn't equipped to even reach out and follow up with him. And, if that happened today, I would handle it much better as a friend by just talking to him about it. Hey, man, just checking in. And I did learn that behavior sometime later on. I knew that the guys from July 7th who were in the shitstorm, the real bad part up there. I mean, it was all really bad, but those guys that were Danny and his group that were up there, then they got to stay home, and they're home for the next couple weeks while we're getting called out to everything, working 18-hour days. And I knew that it was killing them to be home because they knew we were working and they wanted to be there. So I tried to reach out to those guys as much as I could. Just, hey, man, how you doing? But I wasn't equipped for that. I didn't know how to do it. I just knew I should. So the idea, just equip people with this knowledge on resilience, and you can be 30-year guy and pick up something from it, and you can be a 2-year officer and pick up, kind of prep you for what's coming.
Or even a retiree.
Absolutely. Because,
sorry, Chris.
Go ahead, Chief.
I'm a firm believer in grit and resiliency, and I think we all are and want it. I just think we forget that we have to. It's not necessarily something giving at birth, and the needle can change. Programs like this, other training, that's how you get there. It's not just a magical thing you have. And I think as for me, having other people to think about, they may not be there. If I'm there, great. But what about everyone else? And maybe they're not. They don't have that in their lives. They don't have those things that they need to get to that grit. And I think programs like this get you there. I know I can't tell you before my son was born. I can't tell you about the infant deaths that I went to, and I can't tell you about the ones after he was born. But I can tell you the first one I went to after he was born. And I remember walking in, and it was different. I was okay, but it was different. I remember thinking, why is this so different? Well, I had a baby boy at home. Yeah. And so the needle can change for people too. People can that grit isn't something you get and it sticks with you at a certain level throughout your whole career, and it can change. And moving into retirement changes things, and different life instances can change that quickly. And I think we in law enforcement just feel like we get it and we hang on to it, and we're at one level for the rest of our careers, and I think it can move around.
Yeah, that bucket gets full, and you don't even know it. You don't know when it gets full, but it's filling up over time. All those instances just keep getting piled on. I've heard it described as death by 1,000 cuts. I've heard it described a lot of different ways, but it's kind of saying the same thing: is everybody's got a maximum, and when you got a foot in both worlds, and you're seeing things that every day that the common person, gratefully and thankfully, don't have to see, maybe once or twice in their life. You're seeing it constantly on these calls, and it's not just us. It's firefighters, it's the paramedics, it's emergency room nurses and doctors. It's just the constant flow. And some things don't bother you, but they bother your partner. And then the next day something bothers your partner and it doesn't bother you at all. You just don't know.
Well, then you factor in the home life too, and the issues you may or may not be having there. And then on top of and
that can change. Can change daily.
Absolutely.
How you show up to work and your mindset by how you left the morning or for your shift can negatively affect your day at work, and can negatively affect how you deal with what you deal with during the day.
And longevity.
Yeah.
Look, think about the love we have for this job when we started, and how each one of us will say how much fun, and at some point that drifts off into another place. and departments invest in programs like this, you're going to create that retention. You're going to keep it, and officers are happier longer.
Yeah,
if you don't do the maintenance.
You can buy a whole bunch of equipment, and you can buy great uniforms and comfortable uniforms and good cars, but there's so little spent on the officer's mental approach, and I think that's the piece that's been missing for a long time. But I do think departments, law enforcement in general, and a lot of departments have started to realize that we've got a little bit of an issue. You train somebody up and you got them working for 4 years, and then they start battling demons, and you lose them because of an alcohol incident, or what worse, a suicide. And that initial investment that the city made into that person is gone. And it's not going to cure everything, but certainly having people be willing to talk about it and seek the right counseling, you're helping out your employee, but you're also helping out your employer, the citizens, because if I'm mentally in a good place, I'm a better officer. But if I'm pissed off all the time, I'm now a complaint generator, and because I'm just beat down. And you go through phases. I went through those phases in patrol over 10 years, where I'd be at work and I'd be great, and I'd be at work and I'd be like, I'm so sick of the same call at the same place. But it happens to everybody. But long term, if you're handling it correctly at home or outside of work, then it makes it a lot easier to come to work. Not now. I have fun every day, by the way. I love my job.
Well, I feel like this retreat gives you tools. It educates you from the beginning. That first day starts with education. And a lot of us have had some pieces of that education, but some of the younger ones hadn't had any experience with that type of education. And then throughout the other 3 days, they're offering you different things to give you tools. Mm-hmm. For example, the EMDR, and even discussing the book together as a group, listening to everyone's stories, especially Shelby's from her perspective, meditation, yoga. Those were options to go to, not forced on you. Mm. And then it was fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't this cry fest.
No.
Or
although there were some tears shared,
sure.
but they were proper in the proper place, and you get it. I think warriors cry.
Absolutely.
I'm scared of the ones that don't.
It's a release. It's
a release, and to feel comfortable enough in your surroundings to let go of some of that stuff. It that probably made me the happiest, because I could see people were like, oh, okay, I'm safe here. And I don't say safe like safe spaces, but it is safe because we all get it. Every officer there had something at some point, or they're going to. And, everything affects people differently. But sometimes just talking about it, you're like, oh, that was good to say. I'm glad I had that conversation. And I had I made it a point, because I kind of facilitated EMDR time. And so while people were doing other things, I was kind of the go-between. I tried to talk to everybody. I'm like, well, how was it for you? I wanted to know. Some people would come out, I'm like, I don't really think anything happened. And then I had a couple come out and say, that just changed my life. And I was like, wow, that is great to hear. I mean, really, that's the point, is giving you a springboard going forward. And now you know what it is. And so you're like, oh, I just had a critical incident. Now I'm 2 weeks out and I still can't sleep. I'm 4 weeks out. I know I need to go talk to somebody, because this isn't going away. And just being equipped for that, like in that way, could help somebody down the road.
Everyone did it.
Everyone. We had 10 Texas officers, and 2 joined us from San Diego, and all 12 people took advantage of the opportunity to do it, which made me very, very happy. Now, did everybody get the same thing out of it? I doubt it, because everybody's in a different spot, and their career and their experiences are different. But everybody tried it.
I was real hesitant.
Yeah.
And,
you're a thinker.
Yeah, absolutely. And
want to understand. You probably read 3 books about it by now. You have, haven't you? You've probably read a book about EMDR. I guarantee you she has. She's probably certified by now.
More than anything, I was impressed at the work ethic of Dr. Glenn's team.
Oh man, that's taxing, and they were exhausted.
You can tell they put in the preparation and the work. And she came to that retreat in a boot.
Yeah.
Had surgery on a foot. And
it's St. West, Texas. It was not flat. So she's moving around in that boot like I'm moving around with two good ankles. They were exhausted.
They poured in tremendous effort. Yeah. And That's part of that feeling loved and cared for, which, how often do you come home and have a home cooked meal and feel like you can relax and go to bed at any time you want and feel cared for?
Yep. It was perfect. It really was.
So walk us through the grind of getting it done. Because I know Joe, he started with a laptop mic, and just dove right in. What was your grind?
Well, I will say, watching Joe shared this whole vision early on before he'd started, and it was so fun to watch him work through it. And coming up with an idea is really easy. Man, landing that plane is hard to actually make it happen. And your intro, there's a lot of words in that intro that I'm like, yep, fear. Am I going to look dumb? Is this a dumb idea? And I know Joe faced a lot of that criticism, or that's going to not work. This isn't going to work. And it's really, really, really hard to fight through that. Is this going to be, are the officers going to think it's dumb? Is the doctor's going to think it's dumb? It's a fear. Like, I don't get scared at work. All of us, it's a job, and sometimes afterwards, you're like, ooh, that got Western. That was, whew, that was. But you don't, you train your mind to work around that, and I've never felt fear like I felt that morning when y'all got off the airplane, and we'll get to that later. But I've never been more scared in my life. I was scared to death because I just didn't know. I hadn't seen the model yet, so it could have gotten really ugly, but it didn't.
I was so uncomfortable.
Everybody was.
So why'd you pick San Diego? Genius choice, by the way. But
well, and it's funny, when Rainey brought it up, I was like, that's a horrible idea. Rainey and I had been to that retreat center right when they opened it. He bought an old Young Life property and restored it, and which is a funny story if you know Bob Goff and his relationship with Young Life. And so Rainey and I had been there, and then she'd hosted a couple of other events there. So it's easy. The people there are amazing, turnkey. Everything you need's done. So all that, you just got to get people there. So we thought, well, let's just do it there this time, and see how it goes. And then afterwards, you're like, no, this was actually the perfect place. One of the things Rainey brought up, one of the many brilliant things she brought up, was it's easy to wake up in the morning and go, man, I don't want to go drive 3 hours. I'm just not going to go. But when you got a flight with your name on it, you're like, I just got to get to the airport. And so we thought that would keep people from backing out. Because, again, nobody, especially police officers, they want to know the plan. And they want to be comfortable. And that forces you to be a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that getting on that plane and getting people totally away from their surroundings was huge. Also great to get out of the weather because it was beautiful while we were there. So just a complete foreign place for everybody.
it was absolutely beautiful. You had a nice fog in the morning, and it lifted
we were
with
in the
sunshine.
pool, in the pool by the afternoon.
Yeah, a freezing cold pool, which coincides with the cold baths.
Yeah. Joe's outdoor in the sun cold baths.
Yeah.
Lukewarm baths.
Yeah, it's like a soup I'm sitting in.
So talk about your selection process. This is the first rep of getting this, your vision, your goal, your objective done, and you had to select people to go. It's amazing. And I'll preface by saying that Ray and I spent a lot of time in prayer about this. And when things started coming together and contracts started getting signed and we got everything squared away, the date set, we've got the place set, we've got help from Cisco Foods. Now you're like, okay, we got everything ready. It's going to be really weird if it's Rainey and I. And the part that sounded easiest was becoming the hardest. Because like, well, how do I find people to do this? And I reached out to Joe. I was like, Joe, come. You need to come just to see what it's about. He's like, I'm out of town. And you're like, dang it, there's one more. And I'm like, oh, that was going to be an easy one. So I called Figueroa and Sergeant Figueroa. Sergeant. Yep. And I was like, can you come? I'll be in Puerto Rico. I said, well, if you think of anybody, call me. And I mean, within minutes, he's like,
how about Crystal? I'm like, perfect. So I reached out to her. I said, kind of preface it, get me in the door. And because I didn't know her
Sure.
at all. And so I called Crystal and I was like, hey, I want you to come to this deal. And I had all this big speech and she's like, okay. I mean, right off the bat, I'm like, oh, I had a whole paragraph to try to convince her, and she just jumped right in. I was like, this is awesome. So I had one. And
for our listeners, that's Crystal Almeida.
Yes.
And she was on a previous episode.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we got Crystal lined up. We reached out to a friend in Arlington who had retired. And so she had a foot in both worlds. She's a counselor now, Stephanie Gillespie. And so there was our number 2. And then I tricked you into coming.
And I was uncomfortable. To be real honest, I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I've had my fair share of therapy. And every time I drive to therapy, I try some way to talk myself out of it. I don't need this. This is stupid. That someone else should be in this place. And every time I leave, I'm so thankful that I went.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Like I said, I'd never been to a counselor before. So I found, and I was explaining this idea to a friend back in 2019 and who was a counselor at one point. And she's like, so you're going to use your foot in the door as being a policeman to get people to come? I'm like, yeah. And then you're going to tell them how great counseling was for you. Like, oh, no, I've never been to counseling. She goes, don't you think that's a problem? I'm like, yeah, but this book. So I did go see a counselor who actually was able to, she did EMDR. And so I asked to do that too, so I would know what it was. And so, so you were I tricked you. Well, you owed me because I came and spoke to your class. So we're at 3, and we were at 3 for a long time. And Rainey's starting to sweat it out a little bit, and she called Shelby Houston, who's also been on.
Sure.
And she said, Shelby, who's somebody from Mesquite we could invite? And she's like, well, let me think about it. And she called back and she said, well, what about Chief Yates? Y'all need to talk. And so I was down in Bryan, Rainey was somewhere, and Chief Yates was at Tractor Supply. And we had a 3-way phone conversation. And it was so funny on my end because here I am talking to this leader in Mesquite trying to explain something, and he has no idea what I'm talking about. And I'm like, how do I explain this to him that makes sense? And so we hang up the phone, and then Rainey texts not long after, and she goes, it's unbelievable. Chief's in, and they're going to bring a couple people. And then he called back, and he's like, can I come? And we're like, yeah, you can come. He goes, can I bring 7? And we had planned to bring 10 to 12 people. That was the what the doctor suggested, was about 10 or 12 would be the perfect size. And so in one day, we filled the rest of the slots thanks to Chief Yates.
Chief, when you got that phone call from Chris, what was the selling point? I mean, you had buy-in, obviously, and then you wanted to bring friends. What spoke to you on that call?
So, we get a lot of, solicitation for different types of schools, classes. Y'all know what I'm talking about. There's a constant flow in your inbox of different things. But one that first stood out was that Shelby Houston called me. And so when she calls and has something to say to me, I pay a little more attention than the normal inbox evite. And she was describing it to me, describing the people involved. And I could tell real quickly it was best that maybe I just talked directly with them, because she was, she wasn't in detailed on the event. And so when I got you on the phone at the Tractor Supply, while I was sitting out in the parking lot, I could just tell they were very passionate about what we were doing. And I could just tell it was a different, that gut feeling that you get, that this is something's different. There's effort being put into this. There's real meaning behind it, and there's a goal. And I'll be honest, just talk about the words vulnerability. That's not my favorite word either. And that word was thrown around a little bit. And I think I told you, both y'all on the phone, I said, well, don't get too much of your expectations up. I'll go back and I'll ask. And I'll go ahead and share on that part. I sent the email out, and I got 2 responses in about 30 seconds, which was very surprising. And then I think I called you later that day, and I said, I was wrong. I got to come up with a selection system, which isn't pleasant because now I've got more people than I can take, and I've opened the floodgates here, so I've got to come up with a fair way to pick, and which was a great problem to have. and especially if there's going to be more of them. And so I called him back. I'm like, okay, exactly how many can we have? Because I need a number. And that's how that went. And I could tell it was interesting. There was a range of experience, not just all brand new people, and not just middle or the end. It was a range of people. I think we had a good range during that. So, but to answer your question, that was the communication on the phone is what sold me that this was something that we should look into.
We talk about cultural competency a lot in this podcast, and you obviously knew Chris's background with Dallas and also his current role, the Attorney General. Did that have something to do with it? Like, this guy's done this before. He knows, he's one of us.
Yes, it did. I originally didn't know what Rainey did until she told me on the phone. But I think Shelby had shared that with me, and I said, okay. And I did share that with the people that called me and were interested about it. I said that, I don't know why, but in our culture, we all picture laying down on a long couch and, and talking real quietly about different things. And I said, no, this is some people in the industry. And being from DPD, retiree, that like I said, we're right there to the east. So that absolutely played a part in it. And you could see that answered some questions for some people. Who's involved in these type things is so vital as compared to even what's said.
It matters. It's not some snake oil salesman that's,
right.
Yeah.
Or exactly.
Well, and the other word was free. I think you probably got, and it's free. And we're like, God, no, it's free.
I forgot about that.
Probably said
part.
that about 3 times. Like,
I forgot about that.
All
part.
this is free. And we're like, yes, sir, it's free. It's free to the officers.
Absolutely, and that was a big part. I think, especially to start off with,
Chief, talk about Shelby's role in this, because she came along and she's not a police officer, but talk about her role, because it's vital.
Absolutely. So Shelby had called me originally, and that was really the last kind of conversation I had with her about it until we were visiting about going on the trip. Shelby, I've joked with the Houston family before a little bit about them having some kind of royalty status to some extent at our department because of the price they've paid at our department. And so when Shelby's involved, people are paying attention. When the Houston family's involved, people are paying attention. But on this instant, I did not. I don't know if y'all know this, but I did not tell anyone that Shelby was going to be there until they had agreed, because I wanted them to want to come and learn and be a part of it. And then when they found out that she was going to be speaking, they were excited about hearing what she had to say. Because a lot of the officers there may have not had FaceTime with some of the Houston family, so that was a big perk for there.
Will you tell our listeners a little bit about the incident if they haven't heard her episode?
Sure. Is in December. Officer Richard Houston was on duty, and he was shot and killed by a man, and we lost him. And I'd say it this way: I'd say there's different people that knew Richard on different levels. So I say that that day we lost Officer Richard Houston, but a lot of us lost Richard. And that's kind of, I think, I can speak for the whole department. There was everyone. He had a lot of friends there. Actually, some of the people that went on this retreat were graduated that day from the academy, and I'd left their graduation shortly after that when Richard was killed. So everybody knows who she is and may have not had time to visit with some of the Houston family, but they are a inspiration to continue on and give us a lot of strength at our department. They're very much involved with things at our department still, so it's a big deal.
It's a great perspective, too, to hear from a family member within
Yes.
the Blue family.
Everyone can talk about it all day long, but they have a perspective that we can't have. And it gives, I think, at least for me, I don't want to speak for other people, but for me, when I hear them speak about it, the pain and the happy times and stuff, it gives me validity to have those same kind of feelings and thoughts. So having her be able to come was a really big deal.
Hearing her perspective firsthand was very moving.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable.
Hearing her strength and seeing
Yes.
it in person, oh my God! I was so nervous before we sat down with her. But seeing her strength and just resolve and the way she delivered, and I mean, she's only 19, but she seems way more mature and just older than I am and wiser than I am. That gave me strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm in the airport, And I see Crystal, and I'm like, okay, good, I know Crystal. And so we kind of cling to each other, and I'm looking around, and I see your group, and I don't know you guys, and so I'm like, they have to be cops, just by how they're dressed and their mannerisms and their.
Not one pair of 511s. That made me proud.
I didn't see any 511s.
So happy.
Yeah,
I'm so happy.
But you can just tell, that they're a part of our police family, and I was uncomfortable, but I thought it was genius that you have all ages. We had very rookie officers that haven't been in a critical incident, and their learning that they received from this retreat was incredible.
Yeah, that was a real blessing. It was perfect, which we had no control over. You get whoever you get, but we had 2-year officers to 30-year officers, and the program. In my belief is that the program is valuable to every age group of officer, because it's either equipping them with what they're going to go see, or it's helping the older officers kind of work through some of the stuff that they have seen. And when I read the book, I was like, this is valuable to me now, but it would have been very valuable to me back in 1997 when I hired on. And so that was kind of the idea. The goal is to have a wide variety of people. And it played out that way in the perfect way. And I think it had something for everybody.
There was a mystique in the van ride out to this secluded camp with great accommodations, but you're kind of looking around and like, where are we going?
It's about an hour drive up to through Ramona, California. It's a little bit out there, and when I texted Misty, I was like, text me when you get to the gate, and also everybody that's coming's on your plane, so be on the lookout. And she's like, I picked out about 5 of them. I'm like, yeah, there'll be more. And Rainey had established a group text stream with everybody coming. So she said, hey, Chris is out here with a black van. And Rainey picked up Dr. Glenn and one of her associates, Becky, and they were in a different car. And so everybody gathered in the semicircle, and boy, you talk about just standing naked. I had no idea. I had a vision of what it was going to look like, but I had no idea what it was going to look like. And that's the most fear I've ever felt in my life, because I've got all these officers and a photographer staring at me like, all right, what's next? Real inquisitive, not knowing what they're getting into. And I had no idea how to prep them for the hour ride, for all of it. And so, I was a nervous wreck. I was an idiot, bumbling idiot. And that was the longest hour of my life.
Oh, the distrust in my heart. And I trust you, but I found out there was a cameraman.
Yeah,
I found out there's administration, a chief, and therapists. And I'm like,
not your 3 favorite
hell
people.
No.
Yeah.
And then, we've all been to training, some kind of police training. For example, the SWAT conference. Oh. And, it's so ego-driven.
Yep.
And so everyone is sizing each other up.
Yep.
And so I was looking for that.
Yep.
I was looking for the uncomfortableness of the therapist, and then I didn't want anything to do with the cameraman. And he was incredible and funny, and I'm so glad he was there. And then I talked about this at the retreat, but I've never seen a chief as high as Chief Yates is be able to be vulnerable and participate without judgment and just be a true leader. And I hold that title very carefully, because you don't have to be a chief to be a leader. And and you fit the bill. I was impressed.
Thank you.
I will tell you, when Rainey and I were, talking through it for weeks afterwards, we just kept saying, literally God gave us the perfect group and showed us how perfect it could be. And it's now like, okay, this is what it can look like. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up from this point. I showed you what it can look like. And literally the perfect group of people for our first experience. Everybody tried everything. And, but at that moment at the airport, prior to getting in the van, Rainey had Dr. Glenn, and Dr. Glenn was looking at everybody, and she goes, they are so uncomfortable. She
Absolutely.
Just looked at everybody, and she goes, they are all so uncomfortable. And I get it. And I've played that scene over in my head a bazillion times, and how it will be different next time to try to ease some of that tension. Because nobody, to the point we rolled up, and we rolled right into the living room. They call it the living room, and we're greeted by the staff, and like, God, are we joining a cult? What is happening here? And it's just so awkward. And then Dr. Glenn rolls right into her first presentation, and it's about an hour and a half presentation. And it's great. And it was but it was drinking from a fire hose because there's just so much information. And it was, for me, it was at dinner that night when I felt like the ice kind of got broken, and that was due to who was there. I mean, there was a lot of little conversations going on, and we ate really, really well. They do a great job with food, and the other thing that I wanted out of this, there was a couple of things. I wanted the officers to come for free. I wanted them to feel served because we're the servers, and
Sure.
to be served is really it feels great.
It really does.
God, it's amazing what that does for your psyche. And so the staff that was in charge of food, I hadn't actually had a chance to talk to them about it, but you couldn't lift a plate. You finished your plate, she had that thing picked up with a smile. She was truly a servant. And so, that's what I wanted officers to feel. And so that first night, we're all sitting around and kind of joking, and then we kind of had a bigger talk, and I talked a little bit about doing EMDR and how I didn't really feel like it did anything for me that day. But then that night when I went to bed, because I didn't have one critical incident that stood out over the 20 years I was here, I had a lot of things, but not one thing that outweighed the other. And when I woke up the next day after doing EMDR, man, I'd had the most crazy, I've never dreamed like that prior, and I've never dreamed like that since. And I know something probably had moved in my brain that I didn't even realize was not in the right place. And it's not, you brought something, the whole point was I wanted people to know that counseling isn't necessarily kumbaya, laying on the couch, what we think. And if you find the right person, it's amazing. Somebody that deals with officers and knows our language like Dr. Glenn does, and a lot of counselors that work through ATO, they get it. And because we want to come in, got 30 minutes, I need to get fixed because I got to get back out in the street and get to my job or whatever. And the way she addresses it being, it's way more, it's no emotion. It's not emotional. And I think that's where people get confused is when they're feeling emotion about a critical incident, they feel like it's a weakness and it's emotion. It's not. It's how our brain works. It's a function of our brain. Things get stuck in the wrong lobe, and they have ways to move them. And that's really what I wanted for people to understand. And once we had that dinner and there's some laughter and I kind of explained my experience, Dr. Glenn said, "Hey, tomorrow we're gonna first time we get together after breakfast, we're gonna meet everybody." And so that was a really a pivotal time too, because it kind of got everybody to hear everybody else's story. And some of the younger officers were like, "I really don't have anything." It's like, awesome, great. You're going to, whether you like it or not, you're going to have some baggage, or as I describe it, the bucket. You don't know how big your bucket is and how much you can put in it. And, everybody's is different. So that led into, after that meeting, we had a couple of, they offered the EMDR therapy, and we had a couple people go through it, and then we had lunch. And then by the time we were done, all 12 people gave it a shot, which I was worried. I didn't know who would try it, and then we had some things that Rainey and I had planned, little things that I didn't think would be that big of a deal to people, but they really enjoyed it.
Well, let's go back to the meal. It felt like family.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the majority of these people. And by the end of that meal, we all sat down together, a home-cooked meal, a healthy meal that was prepared for you with love, it felt like.
Yep.
And everybody ate together, and it relaxed. And then we sat by the fire pit for a little bit and laughed. And there's freedom to it. Some people, they went for a walk, and some people went to bed. And you have that option. It's not rigid.
It's not rigid by design. Nothing is going to be forced on anybody. I didn't want to force people, but I wanted them to participate, but also to have the freedom to say, "Hey, I'm going to go over here." Awesome, because I don't know what you're going through, and something that might have been said, or you might be just by the intro, you might be working through something that I don't know, and I don't need to know. But whatever you need to do. But I wanted people. There was a couple of things like, hey, hayride, boom. which sounds so stupid to say.
No, I want to get to that.
Okay, we will.
But we haven't got there yet.
Yeah, we haven't. We're still in morning day 2, right? Day 2 morning. Yeah, there is a freedom. It's not real rigid because the idea is to relax and for the couple of days to be restorative. Right? I want you to come out going, man, I feel good. Something's, I got a good perspective on things, or I learned a little something that's going to help me. And so I don't think having every minute of the day planned is the way to do that. Sometimes you just need to breathe a little bit and have fun. I mean, I had so much joy watching a basketball game break out.
Yeah, there was basketball. The football came out. There were the swings.
Yeah.
In the grassy area.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. The bonding part. Back to dinner. The concept of eating on a long table with everybody was just that. I mean, we only ate dinner together like that. Breakfast and lunch was more relaxed, kind of sit. But dinners, we're all going to sit at dinner together because that's where you really, you're feeding your belly, but you grow as a group there at the dinner table.
Well, the grounds. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
No. I was I'm sitting listening to this, and Chris, you and I talked before. Honestly, a year before COVID, you were telling me about an idea you had. Oh, damn, sounds good. It sounds good. And you had a vision for a 5-star hotel atmosphere and a retreat for officers to wait on them hand and foot. And you had an idea, and you were slowly building it, and we talked in your episode about COVID kind of ruining it. The plan itself got COVID, okay, yeah. and it went, and you had to put it on the shelf, and then you obviously kickstarted it. How did you come up with this plan? I mean, I know you had Dr. Glenn involved, and you knew there was going to be a level of counseling, but did you have it planned out to such a degree of the camaraderie that had to be a big part? And then taking into account you were probably going to have officers that did not know each other from different parts of the state and also maybe even the country.
Well, we gave Dr. Glenn the floor. Like whatever she wanted to do, we put that on the schedule. Rainey built the schedule, and that was the first things we laid out. What do you need? What exactly? How does this look to you? And then we built everything else around that. And so, all the way to the details of what time breakfast is going to be. All that came after she gave us the layout of what she's like. I need to do this here, this here, this here.
And that vision of when you actually were sitting there with everybody at that table, and all the camaraderie and all the conversation, and everybody breaking down their little self-created barriers. How did that make you feel?
Man, the relief that I felt that first dinner, where I finally said, okay, this is going to be all right. Things are going to work out. Because up until dinner, I was a little cautious because we rolled right into Dr. Glenn's first session, so there wasn't a lot of talking. So the talking and the camaraderie at that first dinner, I was like, okay, this is working out. This is kind of what I was hoping for. And I will tell you, it was more than I ever dreamed when it was all said and done. I was like, man, I didn't have the capacity to think about what ended up actually happening, which is amazing.
Misty, how was that like for you at that first dinner?
I was uncomfortable at first because I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know what to expect. It was wonderful, actually, because it rolled into police stories and laughing, and then the cameraman had a drone, and we're all around the campfire having some great policing conversation where it felt like home. And then you hear the big splash in the pool down the hill. And we're like, and it was cold. We're like, is somebody in that pool? And the cameraman lost his drone in the pool and had to jump in and get it. And that kind of broke the ice.
Yes, and there was filming. It got filmed, and he never jumped off a high dive. He did a backflip, which was impressive. It was one of those old school pools, the big square with the high dive. Yeah, high dive.
Like Uncle Butch pool, that old pool from the 80s.
We were jumping off the high dive, Chief included, going down the slide. I mean, there was a lot of fun and laughing, too. There was time for that.
We brought Jonathan Valdez was our photographer and videographer, and we had hired him. He was a good friend from our church. It was his first paid job after leaving the church, and we brought him. We really were. He was there, and we told everybody he was coming. Everybody knew he was coming. And his purpose was to capture it just for us for marketing purposes, and I knew that was going to be some friction. I feared it was going to be some friction. A couple times, I was like, "Oh, John, don't do that right now. This isn't the." But by the end, and his personality was clutch. I mean, people are asking, "Hey, can we get some of these videos? Are we going to be able to get these pictures?" Like they wanted to capture that. They wanted those moments that were being captured. They wanted copies of. They wanted like, I want to remember this. And I was like, oh, that I never in my wildest dreams thought that would end up being the case. But they're like, I want to remember this. Are we going to be able to take pictures, get these pictures? I'm like, well, we'll get that done.
So you said the second day that's when Dr. Glenn started with
when she started with the EMDR. Okay. So we had some time to fill here and there, and we did loosely. The folks the couple that manages the property are wonderful people, and they have a tremendous story too. They lost 2 children within a year to a disease, and so Bob Goff heard their story and came out and said, "Hey, y'all need to move from Chicago and run this retreat." And they're like, "We don't know how to do that." And here they are, and they did it right before COVID. So she was the one that did the guided meditation
and yoga,
which again I didn't think anybody would like, and people loved it. I wasn't in there because I was facilitating the EMDR, but everybody that went to that loved it. Not everybody did, which was great. Hey, that's cool. And then Justin, her husband, took us on a hayride, which is funny because we're all a bunch of Texans and we've all been on hayrides, and which led to a really pretty meaningful moment that night, and that ended with us petting cows and feeding horses carrots, and everybody raved about that. I'm like, y'all are all Texas. You could go do that any day of the week, but at the moment and again, it was 60 degrees too, which makes everything better. So so everybody took part in almost everything, and the things that they didn't take part in, it didn't change their experience.
Well, before Shelby presented her story, because she did at the hayride, they had a parallel presented to us about a racehorse.
Yeah.
A racehorse that had come to this farm to recover and regain who they are. And you get to look at this beautiful racehorse that is very high-strung with anxiety, and
spent its entire life going from a stable to the track, back to the stable to a stall, back to the back to the track. All it did was run. It didn't know how to run forward. It only knew how to run kind of sideways or sprint forward. Never was really around other horses except for when it was racing. And that facility used to house several of those. They'd come on vacation and they'd still run a little bit just to stay fresh, but the rest of the time they got to be horses. They'd go out to pastures and hang out with other horses, and they all came back running better times. They came back healthier, and as Justin describes it, it's the same. It's the parallel of what we need as humans, and we don't do it because in our society it's you go. You got to go work your job. You got to go do this because you got all these things you got to pay for, and you forget about yourself. And so that horse stood out compared to all the other horses because it is a pure racing horse. But then it was very uncomfortable being in the circle by itself, and it talked the whole time to its new little family, neighed the whole time to it while he was talking because it didn't like being there. It wanted to be with its people. But it's interesting parallel to what we were trying to accomplish. It's exactly parallel to what that horse went through by coming there.
So that I saw in the itinerary hayride, but then when you actually got into it, it was very meaningful.
Yeah.
And then right after that presentation and the parallel, Shelby presented her story and her perspective as a family member.
Rainey said something when she was introducing her about being the spouse of an officer, and you think you know how you would respond to that moment when you found out that your loved one was murdered at work, but you'd never know how you'll react. And Rainey has said multiple times, she goes, I can only hope I can handle that experience with the grace and forgiveness that Shelby demonstrated at a very young age. And so Shelby was able to tell her story, and it was very interesting because, of course, the mosquito officers knew her backstory. But the other officers that, watching them respond to that was really interesting to me, because even some Mesquite officers maybe didn't have a close relationship, but they know the story. Even the ones that graduated the day her father was murdered. But to watch the officers who didn't know her at all, I mean, it was impactful. It really impactful. She's an amazing human.
Absolutely. And they had those fainting goats.
Yeah, they did have
But
some.
they were so taken care of.
They're fat.
Yeah. You said it, not me. I never got to see any of them faint.
They were too chilled out, relaxing.
Sorry for the fainting
Too
goats.
zen.
You're going to hear this and
Yeah.
heart be broken from being called fat.
They're fat.
fainting
They don't.
goats.
Yeah, they didn't follow through on the fainting part. They got
And they had those fluffy cows.
Yeah, they're like labradoodle
That
cows.
had like a perm.
Yeah, and they just love to be petted. They were all about getting petted. I was like, y'all are brushing cows. But in our critiques, people loved it. They loved that time. And of course, it was everything all together. And it's a really neat setting. And, sun setting, and you're listening to this great story, this amazing story about this horse. And then Shelby gives her story. And it set the tone. And we had a little time to hang out down there. And I think that was very valuable to a lot of people.
Very valuable.
Surprisingly, because when we were planning, we're like, do we really want to do the hayride thing? We could do this here. And we're like, no, let's just go ahead and do it. And we asked Justin to do that talk. And it's such a powerful talk. And you're like, I get it,
It made sense.
Yeah, and if we can do that for a horse, we still can't fix their bones, but it's 2023. But, if we can do this for a horse, we can do this for ourselves and be restored.
There was something to be said, too, about being around animals and nature.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Twiddell uses horse therapy, and it made sense to me after I experienced this retreat why that's so important. Yep. And so I went into the gift shop, because the retreat has a gift shop.
They do have the gift shop.
It's a really cool one,
that
too.
They'll open for us, yep.
And I bought a book there, and it's called Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses by Alan Hamilton.
And you've already read it.
Oh, yeah. I read it as soon as I got home, and it's excellent. But it says slowing down allows for clarification. And that's true. This is an opportunity, this retreat is an opportunity to slow down.
Yeah.
And really kind of reflect and clarify your life.
Yeah. I mean, there's no TVs.
Right.
And you really don't miss it at all. I know you chose to leave your phone in the room.
I didn't even touch my phone
and
that whole retreat.
I will tell you that one thing, if people could train themselves to do that regularly, we get so engulfed in everything that's going on, and just put it away, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And there's not a positive that comes from it, but we don't know that because we got fooled into thinking we have to look at our phone all the time. And just being away from your phone is such a restorative thing in and of itself. You don't have to go to a retreat to do that. You can do that on your own.
I didn't realize there was no TV, so y'all said that. Yeah. You're right, there wasn't.
There's not one TV.
In that whole
The only TV
campus.
there was the one that Dr. Glenn uses for a presentation. And you don't even, it's amazing how little you need it. You don't need it. And it's just, you can, it's actually better relaxation than just dumb yourself down and push and play, because when you're watching a show, you're not really relaxing. And man, just to sit in quiet sometimes is very restorative. And we don't do that enough.
Success or failure?
Well, Rainey and I walked out and went, this couldn't have been more perfect. But really what mattered was not us. It was the two groups I was worried the most about will the doctors think it was valuable for them, worthwhile, and will the officers think that their time was well spent. And from the response I got from those two groups was absolutely. So by no doing of Rainey and I, it was a success.
Each participant, when I got home, each one got a Google, like a reflection.
Yep.
Where you can kind of give feedback.
Yep.
And I poured into it.
Yes, you did.
Because when you get back and have time to really reflect on it, it was even more valuable.
Yeah. Man, it was I woke up the next day when I got back home, and I was sad. I was sad because I couldn't just go meet up with the group, because it was such a great group of people that you really wanted everybody. I wanted to spend time with everybody. Everybody. Not one person did you look at and go, man, it would have been better if that person wasn't there. Everybody that was there got something out of it. Now, they might not have been as vocal about saying that you might have read them one way or the other, but every single person came up to me. If I doubted that they maybe weren't having fun, there was, thank you so much. Thank you this was awesome. And just, again, it's like God made it the way he did to say, all right, here's how I can look. Don't screw it up. Keep going.
Chief, how did you reflect on it, and what was some of the feedback from your troops?
Yeah, personally, I had the same feeling. It was, nice to be back home with your family, but it was like, man, that was, a key to a good trip or whatever is when you miss it afterwards. And
sure.
I think everybody kind of felt that way, getting back on the airplane and stuff. And I felt that way too. It's like, well, that was a really impactful thing. And you sometimes don't realize till you got back how it affected you. And the verbal feedback I got from everybody on the plane and then back at work was very positive. Something I did not know that would come out of it for me in a very positive way is just those relationships with the people that I might not have got to have the same level instead of just being another person in the hallway. We're small enough to know everyone, but you don't know everyone. And to have those conversations afterwards when you get back, I thought, oh, something happened there. And there was great conversations while we were there, and things that needed to be discussed while we were there that was very important. So I, again, was shocked at the amount of people that wanted to go. And then the response when I got back, and I've already had several people ask about going, they're going to do it again. Of course, the ones who want to go back. But new people, they're like, hey, and so to get veteran officers to ask about an emotional survival type retreat, that says something. They're talking, so that's been my response to see that. I don't know, I know what I wrote down, and I meant every word of it. I didn't see theirs, but I know they're talking about the retreat because they're telling other people about
That's awesome. So, yeah, there was a lot of referrals that came in. That was one of the options. If you have somebody that you would in mind that should come or you think would enjoy it, put a name down. And so we got a bunch of referrals out of that too. So, and the more people that hear about it, the better, because it's very unique. It's not something that I've ever seen before. There was a lot, when I looked into it, there were a lot of options for our military veterans, and but it is different. It's a little different. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but there's some differences too. And there was not anything geared towards our community. The everyday, day in, day out, and then come home and be who you're supposed to be at home. It's a different stressor, and so I really wanted something for us, as a community like this.
Misty, I want to ask you something. So I've known you since you walked in doors at Southeast, and this profession, we're all guarded anyway, and I know you personally so well. You're extra guarded, and you said early on when we started this that you showed your vulnerable side, and you had an experience there. Can you talk about that?
And how it relates to this retreat?
Yes.
Well, Chris came out and talked to my students and did an amazing job. And then he was like, well, by the way, hey, will you be willing to do this? And I said, absolutely, without even, because it's him, and of course. And so, but then I got the emails and the itinerary, and I'm like, oh no, what is this? Because like I said before, I'm a therapist snob. Yep. And Dr. Twiddell is incredible, but every time I go to her, there's something in my body that is like, do not go. And then that's just part of it. And so when I got on that plane, I was like, go, I'm committed.
I'm stuck.
And my anxiety was sky high. And then I was afraid because I had recently retired. I was afraid that I no longer fit in this group.
Yeah, her whole deal is, I don't want to take somebody's spot. I go, exactly. No, I need you here, because I knew you were my ombudsman. You would tell me honestly, hey, this is where you failed. This is what you could do different. I knew you would give me an honest response. So I trusted that it would be well thought, and that you, because of our relationship, you'd want it to be good. So you would be honest with me. That's really why I had you come. It's
super important. And it did more for me because it relieved that uncomfortableness of I no longer fit in this community because I have retired from it.
No.
It got rid of that. And then it felt like family again.
Yeah. That
And I
feeling.
needed that.
Yeah. And because when you retire, which you and I are the only ones that can speak to that in this room, it's the lot. There is a huge loss there. And
It's a huge loss.
And for anybody that's listening that's on the verge of retiring, just keep that in mind that there's a huge, you got to grieve a little bit. Most people are so ready to get out, but they don't realize when they're out, they're like, oh, well, this isn't great. Yeah.
It's
But-
like being in the middle of a snow globe, and then once you're out looking in, the connectivity is not there anymore.
That's very true. And then you're thrown in this group of people that you don't know. They all have different experiences, but they still are the Blue family.
Yep.
And it just clicked. And it wasn't like going to a police training symposium. It wasn't like that at all.
It can be so awful.
And it wasn't sit on the couch and tell me how you're feeling about it. It was none of that. It was fun. It was relaxing. It felt like love. It felt like family. And it felt like an escape. An escape with clarity.
Yeah, with purpose. It was an escape, but it's an escape with purpose.
The only thing I could say is I wished it was one day longer.
That was a common
know?
response. Common response. Well, it costs money, so
Rewarding?
absolutely, yeah. On a personal level, just finally seeing it come to fruition, finally see the dream happen was amazing. There was a sense of accomplishment on that side of it. Again, would not have happened without Rainey. But then just the response from everybody, it was so great that people enjoyed it. You pour your heart out into something, and you put yourself out there to be ready to be squished because it's going to be dumb. And so to get that affirmation back from everybody that was there, I mean, everybody, you're like, it was it's like, okay, we're onto something here. This is the right track, and Rainey and I stepped out in faith on this. We to get it done, man. We opened up some credit cards, and because I didn't feel comfortable asking people to support something that hadn't been done before, and so I'm not good at asking for. I'm horrible. I've done this several times for different organizations. I'm not good at asking for money at all. I'm horrible at it. But with this, it's different because I know it can be impactful. There's people who need it. There's people who will benefit from it. And so it's going to make it a lot easier. And the only way we can do it is to have financial support. It has to be free. It has to be free in my mind. And in order to do that, we just got to find the right partners to join in with us and help support it, because we would love to do it 4 times a year. I don't know that we can with the holiday, that November, December, January is hard, but the rest of the quarters, I could see us doing that. Dr. Glenn's group is agreed to do that. The facility's there. And so it's just a matter of getting that money together to keep going, because it does prove worthwhile to me because just in the responses I got from people, I'm like, we got to keep doing this.
Is there a way for people to donate?
We do. We have righteousoaksretreat.com. You can go on there. There's a link. I bet Joe can put it in the episode notes. And we've got it figured out. It's probably about $2,500 per officer. And so we'd like to get 10 officers, 10 to 12, probably 10, just for the doctor's sake, would probably be about perfect. And I would love to do this till I can't do it anymore.
I mean, I left there with an experience. I left there with 3 books, a hat, all of these little things, but I left with an experience that cannot be replaced.
Yeah, those little swag things I kind of laughed. I'm like, cops don't want all this stuff, but Rainey knows better than me on pretty much every topic, and just the hat and a coffee cup and a notebook, a journal for if you want to write stuff, and just a little something to remind you of it.
The rooms are cozy.
They're very cozy. It's a great little place.
Yeah.
It's out in the middle of nowhere in the hills of California, Southern California. It's beautiful. It's different than when I first went there. I was like, this is interesting. I've never seen this before. It's not like Texas. It's not like Colorado either, but it's something in between. And we had perfect weather, and
Some of your young ones went on like 2 runs a day. They were
Yes, they
just
did.
feeling it.
yeah.
And
Well, you're on Texas time, so you're 2 hours ahead, and 8:30 is really 10:30, and so everybody would get up and get moving, and I feel strongly about physical fitness in how it affects you mentally, and so it was great to see people up and moving and getting coffee, and just plenty of trails to run on, and you don't need a lot. You just need some
no.
clothes to wear and nothing fancy, just something to keep you warm, and it's also beautiful. Everybody walked off with check-ins. I was like, wow, nobody checked their bag, or walk-on bags. Nobody checked a bag. Well, except for on their way home, one person.
I did it. I checked my bag.
Oh.
I brought a bunch. I didn't know what I was supposed to wear,
Yeah, you had all the outfits. All your outfit. Got your yoga outfit, your swim outfit, your hang out for dinner outfit. No, it's real laid back, and that's the goal. Just be comfortable.
Chief, how did your spouse feel about you going away to a retreat?
When I texted her,
It's work.
I texted her while I was there, and I said, I don't have to make my bed, and I don't have to cook or clean dishes. And she's like, oh, that sounds great.
Sounds awesome. I got triple time. Thanks a lot.
When I first spoke to you about it, I said, hey, this is something I may be interested in. If there's a spot, I was worried about taking a spot for somebody, so I really appreciated Chris and Rainey because it was a big deal that I got to go. I really appreciated the opportunity. And my spouse was like, you need to go. I think it's important for you to be there. She didn't really explain too much why, and normally, we just kind of read off of each other, but she's like, you just need to go. And so she was very supportive of it.
I think it's important for you to be there as a commander of your department.
Absolutely.
Because that way you can, because people in your position can influence change, and that as opposed to somebody like at my rank that you're seeing it, and you can go back to your department and say something like this can benefit our entire department and generations to come for officers that come through our door.
Absolutely. I went back and I told the chiefs that I work with, I said, I think one of our chief needs to go every time. I just think that's an element that's there. It's important and it's not just, it's for both sides. It's both for the chief going. I mean, I can't tell you how much I got out of being able to visit with everyone that was there, including the people that I work with every day.
That's big shoes to fill, though, because you were vulnerable, you participated, and you can feel your leadership and how much you care about Shelby and your troops. You can feel that. And I don't even work for Mesquite.
Yeah, Misty came back and was singing her praises, and I got to say that when you get kudos and nice things to say about you as a commander from Misty Van Kuren, it comes from the heart. She doesn't just.
I'm a commander snob too.
She doesn't. She's critical, and some commanders need to be looked at through a critical eye. But when Misty Van Kuren gives you compliments at your level, it impacted me, and I was like, wow, okay. I don't even know. I've never met the man, but I trust her judgment on it.
A true leader.
Well, thank you. I'm very humbled by that. I don't know what to say. Thank
Mesquite's
you.
lucky.
Yeah, for
Thanks.
sure. Leadership is not something on your shirt. That's a promotion, and that's command staff. But being a leader is completely different. And watching you interact with your troops and the officers that you didn't even know, I mean, it said a lot about the kind of person you are. Which is really why I wanted to make sure you were here today too, because it's we can give the police officer level talk about it, but having a command staff person witness it and see that, oh wait, this is. And that you're interested in your troops' welfare. I mean, that's huge. And I've worked in Dallas for 20 years. I had people that were like you, and I had people that were the exact opposite. And so it's good to be around people who are true leaders, and you can tell right off the bat, you're like, oh, I could work for that guy anytime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually have a fortune cookie on my desk that says leadership is action, not position. And that
So true.
pretty much sums it up. Thank
There you
you,
go.
fortune cookie.
Wolverton, I'd love to work for you. Well, we always like to revisit the why. Let's finish with letting our listeners know why you did this.
Rainey and I really feel called to do this. We're at a time in our life, our kids are about to go off to college. We've got a lot of great experiences. Though I'm still doing this in a different role with a different agency, I still feel like I'm kind of on the backside of it. And Rainey's been perfectly equipped to put these things together from her experiences with the other ministries she's been a part of, and we really do feel this is a calling for us. We love to serve, and who better to serve than the people I've been out here with, in the thick of it with. And I'm not necessarily talking about the officers and just the departments I've worked for, but just all over. We're all in this together, and so we feel very, very called by God to do this. And like I've said, we feel like as a bone he threw us, he said, all right, here's what it can look like. And so when we walked away, we're like, we got to keep doing this. Just like when we walked away from interviewing Shelby and here, she said, we got to get this thing done. Done was get it done once. Didn't mean just stop. I mean, it's this is something we see going forward for a long time. So we feel called to do it for sure.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Joe, for acting on your vision and making it reality.
Yeah, I mean, this really is a spinoff of, this podcast helped push us over the edge.
Chief, do you have anything to say?
Chris, thank you, Rainey, for including us in this. It's a big deal. And I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run. Up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up